antiga arca funerária, portando a inscrição: Tiago, filho de José, irmão de Jesus, pode ser o tão procurado vínculo com o Messias.
If it is authentic, it's certainly the find of the millennium, not just the century. But this worries me considerably.
Pouco depois que o mundo soube a respeito do ossuário de Tiago, este mergulhou em mistério e controvérsia. Porque a parte da inscrição parece escrita por outra mão. Como o dono do ossuário obteve este artefato? E o que fez o ossuário rachar quando transportado a um museu?
I believe it's a modern day fraud, but I couldn't rule out unequivocally that it's not a modern forgery.
Cientistas e estudiosos estão conduzindo testes especializados no ossuário. E teólogos estão discutindo se Jesus sequer teve um irmão, tudo para determinar se essa arca conteve de fato os ossos de Tiago, o irmão de Jesus. Tiago, o irmão de Jesus?
Hello, I'm Father Candice. For the next hour, we will follow an investigation, a fascinating inquiry into the authenticity and impact of what could be one of the most important biblical finds to date, the James Ossuary.
Mais trapezoidal do que retangular, o ossuário ou arca funerária é bem pequeno. 50 centímetros de comprimento na base estende-se a 55 centímetros na parte de cima. Tem 25 centímetros de largura e 30 de altura. 20 letras em aramaico inscritas em um dos lados da arca formam as palavras: Tiago, filho de José, irmão de Jesus. Desde que o ossuário tornou-se público em outubro de 2002, especialistas têm estudado o que talvez seja um artefato antigo extraordinário.
If this is referring to Jesus, the Christ of the Christians, and we have now brought the Jesus of faith and the Jesus of history closer together, that is a mind-blowing event for a lot of people.
We are detectives as historians, and we have the evidence sitting there, and then we need to generate a hypothesis to explain that evidence. It is an ossuary. It's got real material. It's from the ancient world. The question is, where does it fit?
Arqueólogos encontraram centenas de ossuários e possuem vasto conhecimento sobre o seu propósito e significado. Essas arcas funerárias, geralmente feitas de calcário, eram muito usadas em Jerusalém entre os anos 20 a.C. e 70 d.C.
When a person died, they would be wrapped in a shroud and placed in a tomb that was an above-ground tomb, such as we imagine for Jesus. And then the tomb would be sealed so that as little air as possible would get in. The body, of course, would decompose, and after about a year, the family would come in, gather up the bones, place them in an ossuary, and that ossuary would be then placed in the tomb.
Once the skeleton is taken apart, the ossuary only has to be as long as the longest bone in the body, which I understand is the tibia.
Uma das coisas mais importantes a ser estudada em ossuários é a inscrição. O estudo da escrita antiga, chamado paleografia, é um campo altamente especializado. E André Lemaire, da Sorbonne, em Paris, é um dos maiores especialistas mundiais. No verão de 2002, Lemaire tornou-se o primeiro estudioso a ver o ossuário de Tiago.
How did you come across this ossuary? I mean, you have seen it.
It was very simple, just by chance, I must say. By chance, when I was in Israel for 6 months, working at the Institute for Advanced Studies, somebody just told me I may have something to show to you which could be interesting for you.
misterioso contato de Lemaire em Jerusalém pediu sigilo. Não queria seu nome revelado. Mas o fascínio de um achado potencialmente grande foi forte demais para o paleógrafo ignorar.
He wanted to show me a picture of an inscription which is very difficult to read and which he could not read. So he wanted to know whether...
Okay, if you could read it.
Yes, exactly. So I read with him because it's very clear. James, the son of Joseph, the brother of Jesus. I told him, well, this could be, I was very cautious, this could be the famous James, and if it is James, then it could be Jesus of Nazareth.
The ossuary presumably dates to an era long before people had last names. If they had, the process of authenticating it would be far easier. But since we're left to speculate, Lemaire's next step was to study the names on the ossuary: James, Joseph, and Jesus.
There are three of the most common Jewish names for men in the first century. Yaakov, which is our James, Yosef, which is our Joseph, and Yeshua, which is Jesus, were all extremely common men's names. And so none of those by itself would attract attention. What has attracted attention, of course, is the particular combination here.
There are a number of statistical arguments being presented now with varying degrees of probability assigned to them. One can do this sort of like a slot machine, a one-armed bandit. You know, what are the chances of these three rolling up together in the same series, in one series?
Segundo estudos em inscrições de ossuários do primeiro século, naquela época cerca de 14% de todos os homens judeus chamavam-se José. Cerca de 9% chamavam-se Jesus e 2% chamavam-se Tiago ou Jacó. Cálculos estatísticos indicam que menos de 3 em 2.000 pessoas poderiam chamar-se Tiago, filho de José. Acrescentar um irmão chamado Jesus reduz as possibilidades a cerca de uma pessoa para cada 2.000. Usando uma estimativa populacional de 40.000 homens na Jerusalém do século I, Lemaire pôde limitar as possibilidades.
I calculated maybe for this period, during this period, there were probably about 20 people who could be called James, son of Joseph, and who had a brother called Jesus. But what is very important is that on ossuaries, generally you don't mention the name of the brother.
Why would you mention the brother, since it's usually not? Some say, well, it might be because the brother was somehow prominent. That might be the case. We don't know that it was, because we don't have other examples of that, but that's reasonable to assume.
Depois de completar sua análise dos nomes, Lemaire reencontrou o recluso proprietário da arca.
My conviction was that it was a genuine. That was very clear for me. So I told him now it could be very important. So is it possible to publish? We have to publish it.
Lemaire contatou em seguida um colega de profissão, Herschel Shanks, editor da Biblical Archaeology Review.
Known by its acronym, BAR.
So he called me back and he told me, look, Andre, I know that you are a good paleographer and so on, but you know, it could be so important that it's necessary to have the ossuary checked in a laboratory.
So the ossuary was tested by the Geological Survey of Israel. And the test confirmed that the box was first century and from Jerusalem. And with that information, plus Lemaire's expertise on the inscription, a report was published. And the response to that report was immediate.
Serious questions about the authenticity of the object have arisen since its initial publication in the BAR, several of which I shall mention today. I think there was a bit of a rush to judgment, if I may call it that, and I think it was a little too quick and a little too much at stake here.
Em novembro de 2002, o ossuário foi enviado para Toronto, no Canadá, onde vários arqueólogos e pesquisadores bíblicos estavam reunidos para sua convenção anual.
The timing of the discovery of the ossuary was completely fortuitous for the organizers of the conference, and the quick work that they did in bringing the ossuary to the Royal Ontario Museum so that conference goers could take a look. That was quite fortuitous.
Além de ver o ossuário pela primeira vez, os participantes da convenção também puderam conhecer seu misterioso proprietário. O sigiloso contato de Lemaire em Jerusalém era um engenheiro chamado Oded Golan.
For several weeks I've tried to remain anonymous, as most of you have probably heard, but unfortunately I couldn't do it.
Forçado a se expor pelo intenso assédio da mídia e sob o olhar desconfiado dos especialistas em antiguidades de Israel, Golan finalmente contou sua história. Havia comprado o ossuário no mercado negro, mas as origens dele eram nebulosas.
I purchased the ossuary about 25 years ago in East Jerusalem. At that time I was told that it was found in the valley of Silwan, in the Kidron Valley, which is southeast of the old city of Jerusalem.
The reported place of discovery for this ossuary, namely Silwan, is a very typical kind of place. A number of burial tombs have been found there.
The fact that we are missing the context for this find makes all the difference in the world. Archaeology is about accuracy. Archaeology is about authenticating the context of artifacts in time and place, three-dimensionally. Had we found it in context, we would have had the associated artifacts. We would have had the full skeletal remains to do DNA on, do carbon-14, chronological dating. All these things could have been resolved. The collector has some of the bone fragments, won't let us look at them. I don't quite understand that. They might be relevant for carbon-14. They certainly would be relevant for DNA.
The fact that we don't know the archaeological context of the ossuary makes authenticating it that much more challenging. But if it's ever proven that the inscription on the ossuary refers to the Jesus of Nazareth, it would be an amazing find. When we return, we're going to learn more about the relationship of James and Jesus.
Nesta segunda, eles foram símbolo da luta entre o Islã e o cristianismo. Saladino e Ricardo, dois guerreiros separados pela religião. Uma guerra santa que matou milhares de pessoas em nome de Deus. Nesta segunda, às 21 horas. Entre batalhas e crenças, Santos Guerreiros, somente por The History Channel.
The James ossuary, with its inscription potentially referring to Jesus Christ, has prompted many questions. And one of the most fundamental is actually one that's been debated for centuries, whether Jesus even had siblings. But what do we know about this James, the so-called brother of Jesus?
James is an enigmatic character in that the real historical information we have is very little. There's a reference to him along with some other people as being the brothers of Jesus.
Não é ele o carpinteiro, o filho de Maria, irmão de Tiago, de José, de Judas e Simão? E suas irmãs não vivem aqui entre nós?
And so it's not a surprise that there was a brother named James.
We don't know very much about him as a personality, but it raises those questions about Jesus living in a family context and what would the relationships have been. And I can imagine that for a sibling to have to acknowledge that maybe their brother was the Son of God would be a bit much in most families. Was it that way there? And I think the inscription, if it is authentic and does refer to James, the brother of Jesus, raises all of that.
Para ter uma ideia do relacionamento deles, especialistas voltam-se para os limitados escritos sobre Tiago na Bíblia e encontram indícios de tensão.
Pois nem seus irmãos acreditavam nele.
The family of Jesus seems not to have been supportive in general of Jesus during his lifetime.
E não queriam acreditar nele. Mas Jesus lhe disse: um profeta só é desprezado em sua terra e na sua própria casa.
That may have been one of the reasons why Jesus said, a prophet gets no respect at home. Because Jesus didn't get any respect at home.
A Bíblia também fala da recusa de Jesus em interromper seus ensinamentos para falar com sua família.
Então alguém lhe disse: tua mãe e teus irmãos estão lá fora querendo falar contigo. Jesus, porém, perguntou a quem lhe deu o recado: quem é minha mãe e quem são meus irmãos?
He turns aside and doesn't want to see them and doesn't want to relate to them. So from that, some people have suggested that perhaps during the course of Jesus' ministry, there was some tension between him and his blood family.
Mas após a crucifixão e a ressurreição de Jesus, Tiago parece ter se tornado cristão.
Cristo morreu por nossos pecados, segundo as Escrituras, foi sepultado e ressuscitou ao terceiro dia, segundo as Escrituras. Depois, apareceu a Tiago e a todos os apóstolos.
Nos anos que se seguiram à ressurreição, Tiago tornou-se o líder da igreja em Jerusalém.
We're not really sure exactly how. It may well be that James considered himself simply a successor and someone who continued on the teachings and message of Jesus.
There was something like a Jesus dynasty that developed. That there was some effort to keep the leadership, at least of the Church of Jerusalem, in the family of Jesus. Because after all, the brother of Jesus, James the Just, was the first known ruler of that church.
Em Gálatas, Paulo escreveu:
reconhecendo a graça que me foi dada, Tiago, Cefas e João, que são considerados as colunas, deram as mãos a mim e a Barnabé em sinal de pleno acordo. Nós iríamos aos gentios e eles aos circuncidados.
Notice the order: James, Cephas and John, and I think the order indicates precedence in terms of that leadership.
Mas havia uma divisão a respeito do papel dos gentios na nova religião cristã.
Well, I think it's very clear that there were indeed, as Galatians indicates, two streams of Christianity. One that took in Gentiles free from Jewish demands, free from circumcision, free from the purity and food laws. And there was a Jewish form of Christianity represented by James.
Tiago teve um papel-chave nessa disputa. Permitiu que gentios praticassem o cristianismo sem se converterem ao judaísmo pela circuncisão. Foi um acordo significativo que permitiu o crescimento da igreja.
There is that event which we call the Jerusalem Assembly or the Council of Jerusalem. The figure who comes out there as the leader of the Jerusalem church is clearly James.
Depois que terminaram de falar, Tiago replicou: irmãos, escutai-me. Minha decisão é que não perturbemos os gentios que se voltam para Deus.
And James there doesn't seek other people to give their approval to his views. He says, I judge, and he gives his opinion. And the opinion is an authoritative one to which the Jerusalem church assents.
Mas ainda existe discussão sobre Tiago ter sido realmente irmão de Jesus. Protestantes o veem como um irmão de sangue. A Igreja Ortodoxa acha que ele foi um meio-irmão. E católicos o veem como um primo. Há conflito até sobre a Epístola de Tiago.
Well, I don't think James actually penned the Epistle of James, but I think that letter contains Jamesian tradition.
Pois assim como o corpo sem o espírito é morto, a fé sem obras é morta.
So James was well versed in the Jewish tradition, and he upheld the idea, not just as Paul did, that you just had to have faith, but that works was an extraordinarily important component within that faith.
Referências a Tiago aparecem também fora do Novo Testamento. Entre eles, os escritos do historiador judeu Flávio Joséfo.
Flavius Josephus, who lived between 37 and 100 AD or so, and is the most important source for the period. He wrote 30 volumes of Greek language history about Judea and its relations with Rome. And it's only in the last volume, in about a third of a sentence, where James actually appears.
Ele convocou os juízes do Sinédrio e trouxe perante eles o irmão de Jesus, cujo nome era Tiago.
And since the inscription says James, the brother of Jesus, was son of Joseph, well, there are some areas of intersection between what Josephus says about James and what is written on the inscription on the ossuary.
So James does not play a large role in the history that Josephus writes, but Josephus is very important for understanding the history of James because what he does write about is James's death. And it is this information that André Lemaire relies upon in dating the James ossuary.
James' death, that's not a complicated problem. You have only to read Flavio Josephus. It tells the story of the death of James because it occurred at a special moment between the nomination of two procurators.
And he says that there was a nasty piece of work named Ananus who became high priest. Now this Ananus, in illustration of how bad a fellow he was, Josephus says that when he became high priest, he just convened a court and got rid of some people he didn't like.
In a time when there was no Roman governor in office because one had died and the next one was on the way, he had James and certain other Jewish citizens executed, stoned.
Como esse evento ocorreu durante o intervalo entre dois procuradores ou governadores romanos, Lemaire obteve uma data precisa.
We know the date of the procurator, so we know the date of the death of James, 62 AD.
James died. Well, he dies in 62. And he would be placed in an ossuary. His bones would be placed in an ossuary about a year later, so around 63.
And when we come back, the geological evidence. Does it prove or disprove that the ossuary really belongs to James, the brother of Jesus? When scholars first discovered the ossuary with its intriguing inscriptions, they relied on early historical descriptions of James's death to ascertain that his remains would have been put into an ossuary in the year 63. Then they had to find out if the ossuary could be dated to that time period as well. And so, to determine this, the artifact was put to the test.
This artifact, irrespective of whether or not it is the ossuary of the brother of James, is interesting, important, and significant. It is important because it gives us insight into Jewish burial in the 1st century of the Common Era, AD. It is important because it is an artifact that tells a story.
Limestone ossuaries came into use in the 1st century BCE. In fact, they came into use in the 20s, right around the time of the building of Herod's temple. That's when stonemasons developed techniques to work on limestone that they were working on for the temple. And in the process, you have a flourishing of limestone vessels, limestone tables, and limestone ossuaries that are used throughout the 1st century. That ends right around 70 AD with the destruction of the Jewish temple by the Romans.
Para datar com exatidão o ossuário de Tiago, a arca foi estudada por cientistas do Observatório Geológico de Israel a pedido de Herschel Shanks e André Lemaire, as pessoas que trouxeram o ossuário à luz.
Because of its importance and because of questions of authenticity and so on, the ossuary was tested by experts, highly qualified people in a laboratory. And the results were reassuring in the sense that they found the characteristics, the physical characteristics that we would expect with an ancient object.
Para descobrir que tipos de testes foram feitos no ossuário de Tiago, fomos ao Museu de Arte do Condado de Los Angeles. Aqui, especialistas como Marco Leone e John Hirks conduziram testes sofisticados em artefatos antigos, como esta lápide de calcário egípcia.
So when you receive an artifact, what type of test do you initially do? What's the first thing you do?
Well, the first thing we want to make sure is that the object is stable. We would use the stereobinocular microscope to explore the surface. We're looking for all different aspects of age. We're looking for wear and tear from makers, manufacturing technology, handling with time.
Além de procurar sinais de envelhecimento para autenticar um artefato, os cientistas examinam o material usado na construção.
The initial examination of the object should very clearly tell me that it's limestone. When I look at the object, it's a very fine-grained limestone that's clear both visually as well as under the microscope. But if we want to know what kind of limestone it is and more about where it might have come from geologically speaking, then I would turn to Marco and we would begin a dialogue of taking samples, and Marco would undertake various studies to determine elemental composition, maybe even using a scanning electron microscope to study various aspects of the limestone.
We take small fragments that are then analyzed with microscopes that are more powerful, and they have possibilities of spectroscopic analysis. We use the scanning electron microscope for elemental analysis. That gives us both the composition of the stone, because there's a spectrograph attached to it, and the microscopic morphology at a far higher magnification than is possible with other techniques.
Com uma capacidade de ampliação de 3.000 a 20.000 vezes, o microscópio que escaneia elétrons pode revelar a composição exata de uma pedra e sua estrutura.
We have, of course, a major signal for calcium. Limestone is composed of calcium carbonate. We have a certain amount of silicon and the presence of aluminum, magnesium, potassium, elements that are found in silica and clays that are commonly found in certain types of limestone.
A composição química do calcário varia de acordo com sua procedência. Uma análise adequada pode situar a origem de um ossuário de calcário em uma época e localidade específicas.
Taking the chemical analysis forward with trace analysis would probably allow a specialized laboratory to pinpoint the location of the quarry from which the limestone was extracted.
Ao testar o ossuário de Tiago, o Observatório Geológico achou sua composição consistente com o calcário extraído perto de Jerusalém no século I. Partículas de solo achadas no ossuário combinam com amostras colhidas nessas pedreiras. Outro elemento importante para os cientistas considerarem é a pátina.
As the stone is aging and reacting with atmospheric elements in your hands and so on and so forth, you're developing a different kind of surface which people commonly refer to as a patina. And if this object didn't have this very aged surface, that would send up a lot of signs of concern that the object wasn't authentic. The general surface of the object develops a patina that's a little bit different from what develops inside or around an inscription, where it's not so easy to alter the original surface.
É justamente a pátina na inscrição do ossuário de Tiago que tem gerado debate. O Observatório Geológico anunciou ter achado pátina nas cavidades de algumas letras, mas outras letras parecem ter sido limpas, destruindo a pátina.
What wasn't specified is, at least in the written report, which letters were tested. Were all the letters of the inscription tested? Were only some? And if only some were tested, which ones lacked the patina? Because you see, if there's not, that would imply that the inscription was modern because it cut through the patina.
Though the testing showed that the James ossuary most likely came from the 1st century, many experts are calling for further testing to clear up some issues, like the missing patina. And the experts also caution that even if the patina stands the test, forgery cannot entirely be ruled out.
Certainly, it's been proven that it's not a bad forgery, but that doesn't mean that it's authentic.
People artificially create patinas on a regular basis, and we spend a lot of time differentiating between ancient patinas that have been created by virtue of their existence in time versus something that has been created recently.
There are forgers, and they operate quite widely in the Middle East. They're sort of kitchen sink chemists who concoct various formulas and give chemical baths to artifacts and then bury them, rebury them, expose them again, and pass them off as authentic with a chemically enhanced patina on them.
Com crescente e lucrativo mercado de antiguidades alimentado por falsificadores e saqueadores, o estudo de artefatos antigos se torna cada vez mais complicado.
The antiquities market is actually quite old. We already have forgeries from the Byzantine period when early Christians were fabricating evidence for Jesus or the biblical period or the Gospels. What pilgrims wanted was to take home something with a cross on it, something that would inspire them, something that may have been touched by Jesus.
Very often looters grab what is more appealing to the market, and they will destroy small objects that indeed can tell us a lot, small pots, small fragments. Also, they may, by handling the object, remove clues as to the authenticity.
This may be authentic, but they still think it encourages people who are involved in questionable activities, and they don't think that archaeological artifacts from a non-verifiable location should be entertained at all. And I unfortunately have to agree.
A seguir, por que uma inscrição de 3 nomes gerou tanta discussão na comunidade científica?
And the question is, why add this after somebody has inscribed James, son of Joseph?
Nesta terça, às 23 horas, o submarino não detectável que daria a vitória a Hitler jaz no fundo do mar. Descubra o que fez mudar o rumo da história a favor dos aliados em Detetives das Profundezas, Guerra de Submarinos, somente por The History Channel.
There are hundreds of ossuaries in museums and private collections around the world. What makes the James ossuary extraordinary, why we care about it so much, is the inscription on it. James, son of Joseph, brother Jesus. So, what are the particulars of this inscription?
Ela tem cerca de 19 centímetros de comprimento e menos de 1 centímetro de altura. Da direita para a esquerda diz o seguinte: Yaakov bar Yosef Ahui de Yeshua, que significa Tiago ou Jacó, filho de José, irmão de Jesus.
It is the first mention of Jesus in epigraphy. Otherwise, we know Jesus only from the literary tradition. And it is not the same thing to know somebody from the literary tradition and to see at once an inscription with his name in the stone. You realize much more directly that they were living people.
Dúvidas, porém, persistem sobre a inscrição referir-se de fato a Jesus de Nazaré. Estudar essas 20 letras em aramaico pode fornecer a maior pista para a datação do ossuário. Mas é uma tarefa difícil e especializada.
Handwriting looks different depending on the medium you're using. That is, if you consider the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, people wrote those using a brush with ink on leather. And that kind of writing looks quite different from what you would produce if you're scratching letters into a stone object of some kind, which is what, of course, was done in this case.
A linguagem usada na inscrição em aramaico fornece uma pista de quando foi feita, pois o aramaico era o idioma cotidiano na Palestina do século I, o lugar e a época em que Cristo viveu.
Fortunately, I should say, we know Jesus only with a Greek text, but Jesus was mainly, at least, speaking Aramaic. So for once, we are closer to the words of Jesus, I should say.
Mas a língua é apenas uma pista. Paleógrafos especialistas em escrita antiga examinam muitos fatores antes de determinar a idade de um artefato.
The important question of all is the writing itself, handwriting. In other words, we know the way they wrote, we know what the handwriting looked like in different periods, and this is the science of paleography that refers to the way handwriting develops.
Com o tempo, a escrita aramaica sofreu pequenas mudanças. Os especialistas utilizam essas sutis diferenças para datar inscrições. André Lemaire acredita que essa inscrição foi feita no período anterior à destruição de Jerusalém, em 70 d.C., período no qual Tiago morreu. Lemaire embasa sua opinião no formato cursivo de 3 letras: o Dalet, o Yod e o Aleph.
There doesn't seem to be too much debate about the first part of the inscription, which says Yaakov bar Yosef. There is much more debate about the second half of the inscription and the crucial part that says the brother of Jesus.
The right-hand part of the inscription, which is the beginning part, appears to be in one particular kind of hand. It's very crisp. The letters are very angular, square-like. And there are little tiny triangular wedges on the tops of some of the letters, which make it very specifically this kind of first-century Aramaic. The left-hand part, people say this is written by another hand.
Letters, they reflect a cursive hand as opposed to a more elegant, formal hand in the first part, Jacob bar Yosef portion of the inscription. The shin in particular is troublesome. The double yod is problematical. They look like double letters. The ayin, which ends the entire inscription, is very problematic. It does not match the ayin in Jacob.
Ossuary inscriptions are written very casually in many cases, and we do see mixing of cursive and formal types in those inscriptions. What's striking in this case, though, is that the first part of the inscription, the Jacob, son of Joseph, is formal, and the strikingly cursive forms that we see all come in the second part. It's not as if it's mixed throughout the inscription. And this does raise the possibility that we're dealing with two hands.
It not only is a different hand, but suggests a different time span, a different chronological date and origin.
Outros especialistas também levantaram dúvidas sobre a escolha do dialeto usado na inscrição. Os três nomes, Tiago, José e Jesus, são recorrentes na Jerusalém do século I. Mas a palavra-chave irmão de suscitou questionamentos.
The word for brother itself in Judean Aramaic is ahohi, has a he at the end. In the inscription, we have the word ahui without the he, without the H sound. That's indicative of Galilean Aramaic. So one would surmise that the second part of the inscription quite likely was written by a Galilean, and reasonably one could suggest that it would have been post-1st century. And the question is, why add this after somebody has inscribed James, son of Joseph? Why now would a Galilean hand write brother of Jesus after the 1st century? That was the thing that interested me.
Well, one possibility is that the person that added this was himself an early Christian, and either knew that this was indeed the ossuary of James, who was the brother of Jesus from the New Testament, and wanted to simply specify that. Or perhaps he hoped it was. Now, I should say in all candor that the other possibility for the second-hand idea is that it's modern, and that someone at some point added brother of Jesus in order to make an ordinary ossuary into a sensational object so we would all get excited about it as we are. That seems to me to be less likely than the possibility of an ancient second hand on the basis of what I know of the physical examination that's been done of the ossuary.
Various theories have been offered about the inscription. Yet some experts believe that the inscription is from the 1st century and therefore could possibly be related to Jesus of Nazareth.
I follow the school that is inclined to say that this is all by the same person, and that the minor discrepancies in the script are, if I write a letter, I'm sure some of the letters at the bottom of the page are not going to be identical to those at the top. Minor discrepancies for me are not a big deal.
So people are saying there are two hands in this.
Well, that's not true. That's not true because there are not two styles. You have only a few letters which are more cursive than other ones. Almost the same kind of difference between capital and minuscule. You have sometimes the presence of a few more cursive letters. That also is a phenomenon which is very well known on ossuaries, because the inscriptions on ossuary are not the same as the inscription on manuscripts. They are more or less a kind of a graffito. When you look very carefully at the inscription, it is very clear that it was done only with one hand.
And so the debate continues. But ultimately, the differences between our experts may be very small. It's almost as if you have to choose who you want to believe, just like the matter of faith. Which raises even another issue. Is a physical artifact needed to prove the Bible? We'll put that question next to our experts when we come back. Ever since the James Ossuary became public, it has attracted enormous controversy about its inscription. about the way its finding was announced, its ownership, and even as it made its way from Israel to the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto for its first public viewing in November 2002.
Finally, the box is on its way. And of course, then the extraordinary thing was that it got damaged in transit. Packed. And it received a blow in shipping the way you are horrified when you watch your suitcase go tumbling down the conveyor belt at the airport and crunch. The cracks were completely through the width of the wall of the vessel.
Unfortunately, the cracks do penetrate the inscription, and in fact at an important point, so that we're going, for some of our analysis now, the inscription, we're going to have to rely on photographs that were taken before the damage was done.
I understand from colleagues at the Israel Antiquities Authority that it was inappropriately packaged, and when it was transferred to Toronto for exhibit at the Royal Ontario Museum. And that is certainly one of the unfortunate byproducts of this coming from a private looted collection and not museum to museum, government to government.
It was a tragic event, but it was a big relief that we hadn't been responsible for that.
Conservators at the museum were able to seal the crack, but the damage had been done. Since then, scholars and the public alike have been studying the ossuary and forming their own opinions. And it really all comes down to the names etched in stone: James, Joseph, and Jesus.
Even just writing brother of on an ossuary is very rare. But then if somebody's going to bother to write brother and it really is Jesus, why wouldn't someone say Jesus the Christ? Lord Jesus. Some indication that this is the Jesus rather than another one of the thousands of Jesus running around.
Even Josephus, where he wants to identify this James, has to say James, the brother of Jesus, the so-called Christ. Because he knew there were so many Jameses out there and so many Jesuses. I mean, this is something we probably in the modern age find it hard to get a grip on.
It's as if the inscription said, Richard, son of Bill, brother of Bob. That's effectively the range of the inscription, I think. If you said that, brother of Bob, in an inscription, you would need to say, clarify why you're calling him the brother of Bob. Which Bob?
But why this find is so potentially important is that we're not just talking about any old Tom, Dick, or Harry. James, Joseph, and certainly Jesus are pivotal characters in a religion that has lasted 2,000 years. Though religion is a matter of faith, the authentication of the ossuary is in the hands of science. How do the two factors, science and religion, coexist? What role do they play in James' ossuary and our understanding of it?
I think religious faith is based on a number of things that are not influenced by the discovery of an object, the authentication of an object, the rejection of an object as inauthentic. I think those things are not the basis of faith. On the other hand, I think members of a faith community could justifiably become excited about the recovery of an object that brought them closer into a more intimate relationship with the member of the ancient faith community in which they stand.
Well, it's still, in a sense, blind faith in the ossuary, but it is blind faith with an object to look at. You don't have James in front of you. You don't have Jesus to talk to here. But you have something that does come from the first century.
Mas qual é a conclusão? A arca se refere a Jesus de Nazaré?
It's highly probable that it's from the time of the person that we know as James the Just, Whether we can go that one step further and say that this is the ossuary of the James the Just, that is really a step of faith, and we'll never know the answer to that one.
I think there's no way in which we can ever be absolutely sure. Since all three names are so common, we can never be absolutely certain. There is no such thing as absolute certainty in history or in archaeology. We can have a great deal of certitude about it, but we cannot have absolute certainty.
What we know for certain is that an ancient stone burial box was discovered that reads, James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. Experts still differ on its authenticity, and we may never have complete unanimity on what it means. But if this ossuary did belong to the James, this physical piece of history would be the oldest written reference to the Christian Messiah. Of course, scientifically proving the Bible is not necessary for the faithful, but it helps us think of when Jesus walked the earth. For me, it's been a great opportunity to revisit James' teachings and his belief that faith alone isn't enough. You have to back it up with good works. And that message of helping others and why to help others is timeless and awesome. For the History Channel, I'm Ken Deasy. Thanks for watching.